My brother played the lawyer a voicemail of our mother approving a new will, her voice, clear as day, leaving him everything. There was just one problem. Our mother had lost the ability to speak 8 months before that recording was made. And the one person who could prove it was the speech therapist who'd worked with her every week until the end. That woman is Sophia, and this is the inside story of how her brother Stephen tried to rewrite their mother's will using artificial intelligence, and how one therapist's detailed notes became the only evidence that could prove the voice was a fake. It started months earlier, when Deborah suffered a massive stroke that took something irreplaceable. The stroke hit on a Thursday morning in late March. Deborah was 67, active, sharp as a tack, still managing the family rental properties from a laptop at the kitchen table. One moment she was pouring coffee. The next, she was on the floor, unable to form words, the right side of her body gone slack. Sophia was the one who found her. She called the ambulance while pressing a dish towel against her mother's hand, a gesture that meant nothing medically but everything emotionally. She rode in the back of the ambulance, staring at her mother's face, searching for recognition that flickered but didn't hold. The hospital ran tests. Massive ischemic stroke. The neurologist explained that the language centers of Deborah's brain had been severely damaged. She could understand speech mostly, but she could not produce it. Not a word. Over the following weeks, physical therapy helped her regain some movement on her right side, enough to grip a cup, to nod yes or shake her head no. But the silence remained. By the time she was discharged to a rehabilitation facility in early May, the medical consensus was clear. Deborah had aphasia so profound that verbal communication was gone. Not temporary, permanent. That's when the shifts in the family began. Stephen, the older brother, had always been the one with the big plans and the unpaid loans. He ran a struggling marketing consultancy and had asked his mother for money more than once. After the stroke, he started showing up at the care facility more frequently, always with a smile, always with a coffee for the nurses. He positioned himself as the devoted son, the one handling things. Sophia noticed he'd taken an unusual interest in their mother's legal documents, the will, the power of attorney, the property titles. But she didn't want to believe her brother capable of what she suspected. Not yet. The original will, drafted 5 years earlier, was straightforward. The house in Phoenix, the 2 rental condos in Scottsdale, the investment accounts, all divided equally between Sophia and Stephen. Deborah had also appointed Sophia as her medical power of attorney, a decision Stephen had grumbled about at the time but eventually accepted. The document was signed, witnessed, notarized, and stored in a safety deposit box both siblings knew about. There was no ambiguity until the voicemail appeared. On September 18th, Stephen called the family attorney, a man named Robert Keller who had handled Deborah's affairs for 2 decades. Stephen told Keller that his mother had changed her mind. She wanted a new will, he said, one that left the bulk of the estate to him. As proof, he played a voicemail, a recording of Deborah's voice, clear and deliberate, saying she'd been thinking about things differently and wanted Stephen to inherit everything. Keller listened. He noted the date stamp on the recording, September 12th, and he agreed to draft the new document. But here's the thing. By September 12th, Deborah had been completely nonverbal for nearly 6 months. She hadn't spoken a single intelligible word since the stroke. Not to Sophia, not to the doctors, not to the speech therapist who saw her twice a week. And when Sophia got wind of what Stephen had done, she knew only one person could verify the impossibility of that recording. Kathleen Morrow, the speech-language pathologist who had been documenting every session, every assessment, every silent attempt at communication since the day Deborah was admitted to rehab. Kathleen had the records, and she was about to become the most important witness in a fraud case that would tear the family apart. Sophia called Kathleen Morrow the next morning, her voice shaking as she explained what Stephen had done. Kathleen listened without interrupting, then said 3 words that changed everything. "I have the files." She'd kept meticulous session logs, dates, times, assessments, progress notes, everything. She invited Sophia to her office that afternoon. Kathleen's office was small, lined with books on neurogenic communication disorders, a whiteboard covered in phonetic diagrams. She pulled a thick binder from her filing cabinet and laid it on the desk. Inside were weekly reports spanning April through mid-September, each one documenting Deborah's attempts and failures to produce speech. The April 2nd entry read, "Patient unable to phonate voluntarily. No vowel or consonant production observed. Communicates via head nods and eye blinks." The May 20th entry, "Attempted speech-generating device. Patient successfully selected water and tired using button press. No verbal output." The September 10th entry, just 2 days before the date of Stephen's voicemail, read, "Patient alert and responsive to yes-no questions via head movement. No spontaneous vocalization. Speech production assessment, 0 functional words." Sophia ran her finger down the page. September 10th, 2 days before the recording Stephen claimed was made. Then Kathleen showed her the September 15th session notes. "Patient frustrated, made guttural sound during therapy, no linguistic content, encouraged to continue using device." And the September 18th entry, "Patient calm, no vocalization, caregiver daughter present." That was Sophia. She'd been there that day, holding her mother's hand, helping her press the buttons on the communication tablet. Her mother hadn't spoken a single syllable, but here's where it gets worse. When Sophia obtained a copy of the voicemail from the lawyer's office, she sat with Kathleen and played it. The voice was unmistakably Deborah's, the cadence, the slight Midwestern inflection, the way she stretched her vowel sounds. The recording said, "Robert, it's Deborah. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the stroke. Stephen has been so helpful. I want to update my will. Everything should go to him. He knows my wishes. Please make the changes." Kathleen listened, her brow furrowing. Then she played it again. And again. On the 4th listen, she paused the recording mid-sentence and looked at Sophia. "That's not real-time speech," she said. "There are no breathing pauses. Listen between helpful and I want. There should be an inhalation. There isn't one. It's an edit. Somebody stitched words together or generated them entirely." That single observation cracked everything open. Kathleen, trained in the mechanics of speech production, could hear what the lawyer couldn't. The absence of natural respiration, the slightly too even pitch, the way the consonants were perfectly articulated in a voice that had been silent for 6 months. Real speech after a stroke like Deborah's would have been halting, effortful, slurred. This was pristine. Too pristine. Sophia took the recording to an audio forensics expert, a man named Dr. Alan Yuan who specialized in deepfake detection. He ran it through spectral analysis software. Within hours, he confirmed what Kathleen had already suspected. The voice was AI-generated. The software identified telltale artifacts, digital signatures left by a consumer-grade voice cloning application. The kind you can download on your phone for a few dollars, upload old voice samples, and type whatever you want it to say. Stephen had used old family videos and voicemail greetings to train the model, clips from a birthday party 3 years ago. A holiday message from their mother's phone, and then he'd typed the script and let the algorithm speak. But Dr. Yuan found something else buried in the metadata. The file had been created on September 11th at 11:42 p.m., not September 12th, as Stephen claimed. The voice app logged the exact timestamp of generation. Stephen had been up late the night before, fabricating his mother's dying wish while she lay silent in a care facility across town. And the date stamp on the lawyer's phone. That was just the time Stephen forwarded the voicemail to himself, altering the metadata to make it appear as though it originated from Deborah's number. But Stephen made one fatal mistake. Deborah's phone records showed no outgoing call on September 12th. She hadn't placed a call since March. Armed with Kathleen's clinical documentation, Dr. Yuan's forensic report, and the phone records, Sophia confronted the family attorney. Robert Keller was a cautious man in his 60s, someone who'd drawn up wills for Deborah's parents decades ago. When Sophia laid out the evidence, he sat back in his chair and removed his glasses. "I've seen a lot of family disputes," he said quietly, "but this is the first time I've been played a recording of a dead woman who couldn't speak." He immediately froze the new will from proceeding to probate and notified the state bar's ethics hotline. Stephen, he said, had committed not just fraud but criminal forgery using artificial intelligence, a case that was about to become a legal landmark. Now you might think this is where Stephen backed down. It wasn't. When Sophia returned home that evening, there was a letter taped to her front door. It was from Stephen's lawyer, a demand letter threatening to sue Sophia for defamation and tortious interference with inheritance, accusing her of fabricating the speech therapist's records to discredit a legitimate will. He was doubling down, forcing a court battle that would drag their mother's memory through the mud and pit sister against brother in open court. But Sophia wasn't backing down either. She had something Stephen didn't, a witness who'd been there, week after week, documenting every silent day. And Kathleen Morrow was ready to testify. The deposition was scheduled for November 14th in a sterile conference room downtown. Stephen sat across from Sophia, his lawyer beside him, the same flat smile on his face he'd worn at the care facility. Sophia's attorney, a sharp woman named Alina Vasquez, had Kathleen's binder open on the table, tabbed with colored flags. She'd brought Dr. Yuan's spectral analysis report, the phone records, and a certified letter from the voice cloning app's parent company, confirming that a premium account registered to Stephen's email had generated a synthetic voice file on September 11th. Stephen's defense, at first, was indignation. He claimed Kathleen was biased, that his mother had made a partial recovery that week, that Sophia had manipulated the therapist. But Alina wasn't done. She played the voicemail in the room. Then she played a real recording of Deborah from the year before the stroke, a birthday message she'd left for her sister. The voices were similar, yes. But then Alina played a third clip, a sample of an actual stroke survivor with Broca's aphasia attempting to speak after 6 months. The difference was stark. The survivor's voice was labored, breathy, consonants blurred. Deborah's voice in the voicemail was flawless. No struggle, no hesitation, no humanity. Then Alina called a witness by video link, a neurologist from the rehabilitation center. She testified that Deborah's specific lesion, a left middle cerebral artery infarct, had destroyed the neural pathways necessary for volitional speech, not impaired them, destroyed them. There was no medical scenario, no window of recovery in which Deborah could have produced that voicemail. If this recording is genuine, the neurologist said, then every textbook on aphasiology is wrong. Stephen's lawyer tried to object, but the damage was done. Then came the forensic accountant. While the will fraud was unfolding, Sophia had discovered something else. Stephen had been siphoning money from their mother's rental income for over a year. Small amounts at first, a few $100s a month, listed as management fees, but after the stroke, he'd gotten bolder. He'd transferred $8,000 from Deborah's checking account to his on the week before the voicemail appeared. The week he claimed he was just being a devoted son. But the real collapse came when Alina introduced Deborah's actual will, the one from 5 years earlier that Stephen had tried to replace. It wasn't just a property division. In the margins, Deborah had written a personal letter to her children, hand-dated and notarized as a codicil. It said, "Sophia is to manage my care if I cannot. Stephen means well, but he is not good with money. I love him, but I trust her." Those words, read aloud, landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Stephen's face changed then. The smile evaporated. His lawyer asked for a recess. But there was no recess from what was coming. The district attorney's office had opened a criminal investigation based on the forged notary stamp alone. Now, with the forensics, the medical testimony, and the financial records, they had a case for felony fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. Stephen was arrested 2 weeks later, processed at the county jail, and released on a $100,000 bond. And still, the story took one more turn. During discovery, Sophia's team obtained Stephen's laptop. On it, they found more than the voice clone. He'd used the same app to generate a fake message from Deborah to her bank, authorizing a wire transfer. He'd attempted to impersonate her to cancel a life insurance policy and redirect the payout. He hadn't just tried to steal the inheritance. He was systematically dismantling everything their mother had built, one algorithm-generated sentence at a time. When Sophia visited her mother that evening, she sat beside the bed and took her hand. Deborah looked at her, eyes clear but body still. She squeezed once. Sophia squeezed back. "I'm not letting him take anything else," she whispered. The trial was set for spring. And for the first time since the stroke, Sophia felt not fear, but something like peace. Because the truth about that voicemail was no longer a secret. It was evidence. And the real will, the one that honored her mother's trust, was still standing. The trial began on March 2nd. Kathleen Morrow was the state's first witness. She took the stand in a navy blazer, the same binder of session notes under her arm, and she spoke with the quiet precision of someone who had spent 30 years documenting exactly what she observed. The prosecutor walked her through the timeline. Initial assessment, weekly progress notes, the September 10th entry showing 0 functional words, the September 15th entry confirming only guttural sounds. Then the jury heard the voicemail. Kathleen identified the breathing irregularities, the unnatural packing, the absence of effort that would have been physically impossible for Deborah. The defense tried to challenge her credentials. She listed her board certifications, her publications on post-stroke aphasia, her 16 years at the rehabilitation center. The cross-examination lasted 40 minutes and got nowhere. Dr. Alan Yuan followed, projecting the spectral analysis charts on a courtroom screen. He pointed to the telltale digital artifacts, high-frequency patterns that no human vocal tract produces. He explained how consumer-grade voice cloning software leaves fingerprints, how even the best deepfake can't replicate the micro-tremors of a real larynx. And then he showed the metadata timestamp. September 11th, 11:42 p.m. The defense attorney asked if the timestamp could have been manipulated. Dr. Yuan replied that yes, timestamps can be altered, but the parent company's server logs couldn't. They showed the exact same creation time, logged remotely from Stephen's account, from Stephen's IP address, from Stephen's laptop. Stephen's defense crumbled after that. His lawyer shifted strategy, arguing that Stephen genuinely believed his mother had recovered briefly and that the voicemail was authentic. But then the prosecution introduced the financial records, the transfers, the canceled insurance policy, the systematic dismantling. And then they played a recording of Stephen's jailhouse phone call to a friend, obtained legally, in which he said, "It was just an app, man. How was I supposed to know they could trace that stuff?" The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict came back on a Friday afternoon. Guilty on all counts: felony fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse, and forgery. Stephen was sentenced to 7 years, with the possibility of parole after 4. He was ordered to pay restitution of $112,000, covering the money he'd stolen plus the legal fees Sophia had incurred defending the estate. But the story didn't end there. During the sentencing phase, the judge admitted a document that had been sealed until that moment. It was a letter Deborah had written to Sophia 3 years before the stroke, left with Kathleen with instructions to deliver it if anything ever happened. Not a legal document, something more personal. The letter read, "My darling Sophia, if you are reading this, then I am gone or unable to speak for myself. Your brother loves you, but he is not well. He will try to take what isn't his. I have seen him do it before. Please protect what I built, not because the money matters, but because he must not be rewarded for the worst parts of himself. Kathleen has the records. Trust her. Trust yourself. I love you." Sophia read those words alone in the hallway outside the courtroom, Kathleen beside her. She had spent months fighting for legal truth, but this was the emotional truth she hadn't known she needed. Her mother had seen it coming. Her mother had prepared. Not with a will, the will was already clear. She had prepared with a witness, a therapist who documented every silent day, and a letter that removed any doubt about what was right. The real will was probated without further challenge. Sophia moved her mother out of the care facility and into a small, accessible apartment attached to her own home, with a view of the desert and a garden she could sit in. Deborah never spoke again, but she learned to use the communication tablet with her left hand, pressing buttons slowly, forming sentences that Sophia learned to read in the pauses between software beeps. Sometimes she typed, "I love you." Sometimes she typed Stephen and then a sad face. And sometimes she typed nothing at all, just reached out and took Sophia's hand. That image, mother and daughter sitting together in a garden, the real will honored. The fraud behind them is where the legal record ends. But the questions this case raised about artificial intelligence and family betrayal are only beginning to surface. And what I want to talk about now is what happens when the technology moves faster than the law, and the people we trust most turn out to be the ones we should have feared. Voice cloning software is cheap, accessible, and improving by the month. Right now, there are apps that can generate a convincing fake from as little as 30 seconds of someone's voice. The law is struggling to keep up in most states. Using AI to impersonate a living person for fraud is a crime, but the rules get blurrier when the voice belongs to someone who can no longer speak for themselves. Deborah couldn't testify. She couldn't rebut. The only thing standing between a lie and her legacy was a binder full of clinical notes and a speech therapist who refused to stay silent. I want you to think about the people in your life whose voices you would trust without question: a parent, a grandparent, a partner. Now imagine hearing that voice say something you know they could never have said, and having to prove it was a machine. Sophia had the records. Most people don't. Most people would never even think to build a paper trail against their own brother. But Kathleen did. And that's the difference between losing everything and keeping a promise. If this story made you feel something, anger, grief, or just the quiet recognition that the world is changing faster than we're ready for, then hit that subscribe button. I share real stories about the moments when life, law, and technology collide. Drop a comment below. If you could protect one possession or one person in your life from this kind of betrayal, what would it be? I read them. And share this video with someone who needs to know that the voice on the other end of the phone might not be the person they think it is. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.